Hello and welcome to number 3 in this series of instructional videos as to building up an oil painting on canvas. My name is Michael Turpey. I'm a landscape artist, very active at the moment, especially during lockdown. Here based in Edinburgh, consuming the beautiful subject matter of architecture and natural forms, which are some of my specialities. Now today, in this video, I'm going to speak to you about some of my influences and where I'm coming from when I am progressing a picture. I'll start off with the subject, but then stray away from that to unleash some of the emotion and poetical kind of influences to combine and develop the subject. Now, some of my major influences include people like George O'Keeffe, 20th century artist, and I've got this wonderful book here of her paintings. I was fortunate enough to visit New Mexico and was very much fired up by the intense light there. Now you can see this one called Paderno is one of the mountains in New Mexico, and it reminds me an awful lot of Cezanne, and I'm going to speak to you about Cezanne again, who a 19th century painter who worked in the south of France in Provence, and was very interested in structure, and from him developed the style of Cubism and influenced people latterly like Picasso, the development of abstract art and so on. So George O'Keeffe is one of these artists who becomes more abstract in some of her works here, and you can see these. Now I just love the colour and the form that she gets there in these canvases, and I like to combine something of that method of working in my own work. So that's one of the important books in my collection of art subjects. Another artist who I find quite inspiring is Oskar Kokoschka. Now, Oskar Kokoschka is like an Austrian expressionist artist who uses painting to unleash his feelings. He was one of those of a Jewish family who had to exile himself away from Austria at the time of the Second World War and come to Scotland here, and uses Ullapool as one of the locations for some of his work, and I'll show you some of those later on. So that's Kokoschka as another influence, with loose brushwork, with real enjoyment in the laying on of paint and so on. Here is Vincent van Gogh, who's known as a post-impressionist. The Impressionists were painters who worked outside in France during the 19th century, working directly from the subject, which was very innovative at the time, where previously people had worked in studios. So the light and colour fired them up. People like Claude Monet is perhaps one of the more familiar ones, and Pissarro, Sicily, huge group of artists who influenced many in an international way. And of course Van Gogh. I connect with Van Gogh very much. I was able to go over to the Netherlands and visit the Van Gogh Museum, Colombia Museum also, and get up close before lockdown, so I'm still carrying that strong influence with me. Now this shows you the places where Van Gogh travelled, and that tells you a bit more of his life, and something I didn't know before. He came to London, well I knew that, but he consumed the works of Charles Dickens, who I happen to be reading at the moment, who paints very colourful characters in terms of his literary output. Now, the Scottish colourists who are around in the kind of early part of the 20th century, including people like Cadell, who was based in Edinburgh, as well as Peploe, who knew each other very well and used to go on painting holidays together in the west of Scotland. But this has got other members of that group, including Ferguson and others too, and their work it's just so bold and colourful. You can easily see where the influence of people like Van Gogh and the French painters came into their work, and they had a lingering effect in the development of Scottish painting, which tended to be quite colourful and connected with French painting quite a lot. So I'm now going to show you a bit more in detail on my iPad here some of the works which actually influenced me quite a lot and fired me up. This one, Callure, is by André Derain. Now Derain was known as a fauvist, one of the wild beasts in terms of the selection of a high range of colour, and he worked at one point alongside Matisse, who was one of the leading lights in the development of semi-abstract art. So I just love this huge bold colour and the overlay of texture. Okay, I'll move away from this one. Here, again, a Van Gogh. The thing about Van Gogh that I love is the strong overlaying of paint, the firing up, the energy, and it's why I love painting in oil paint, because it's so enjoyable, the process, so evocative and emotional. Okay, and of course this one, well known, it's one of my favourites as well, The Outdoor Cafe in Arles by Van Gogh, and I love the cobbles. And this is another thing that I love when I'm painting here in Edinburgh, is the representation of the cobbles and the paving and the street furniture that I like to talk about also. So we'll move away from him, and let's see where else I'm going to go. I'm going to go here. And this is Cezanne. Cezanne is a major influence on me with the colour and structure and the interplay of shapes, positive and negative shapes through tree branches and architecture. And of course, I spoke earlier of the connection between that and some of the pictures by George O'Keeffe that I showed you earlier on there. Now, one of my great heroes, or heroines if you like, is Joan Eardley, who is a Scottish landscape painter, sadly no longer with us, and she was around in this kind of up until about the 1950s. A graduate of Glasgow School of Art, and she was not dissimilar from Van Gogh. She spent a long time in a fishing village up in the northeast coast of Scotland called Catterline, and here is almost a self-portrait with her sketching the view of the emotion, the wind. That she used to take her canvases outside and all sorts of weather. I love this one. She used to have to strap the canvas down and almost strap herself down, a bit like Turner, who's one of our other remarkable artists, English painter, who it was said went on board a ship and had to tie himself onto the mast so that he could get the energy of the atmospheric results of weather. And you can feel that very much here in the highly abstracted version of the little boat sitting here, and the overlay of paint, the energy of the paint, I just find is just hugely stimulating. Now, I'm going to touch on Kokoschka, I spoke about earlier on, to show you one of his pictures. This is of our pool, and it's very loose brushwork, it's very colourful, and it's a real sort of poetical statement, but there is a lot of energy, I think, and distress perhaps too unlocked here. Remember, he was the artist who had to come over here to get away from the oppression of the Jews during wartime. And more kind of native to Kokoschka is the Opera House in Vienna. And just look at that. Just look at the energy and the thick brushwork in this picture here. I just love it. And see which other one we can go to is one of our native Scottish painters, Sir William McTaggart, very much to do with West Coast seascapes, another one who had to tie his canvas down to secure it from the wind and rain. And you can almost see bits of the sand and whatever stuff blowing around in there. So this was a time, a period when artists were taking the work outside, which I love to do as well. Now I'll move on to another picture here, and this is a train. You can see that by Frank Arbach, who is known as one of the British artists based very much in London, and you other artists, probably no more well known, people like Francis Bacon, but again, look at the energy and the brushwork in there. It's just incredible. All right. And I must, before I go, I've got to show you a couple of works in more detail of the Scottish colourists I was talking about earlier. Again, very much influenced by French outdoor methods of working, methods borrowed or inspired by the Impressionists of strong colour and light. I just love the fence posts, and this one here by Peploe, and the haystacks too, which give a sense of geometry. And there's this very much, I feel, an influence of Paul Cezanne in this picture too. And Cadell here, another Scottish colourist, and you can really feel as if he was outdoors when he was painting that scene there. Nice and fluid, lots of fugitive light, as I like to call it, in the reflected shadows and so on. I find a great inspiration too. So that's just a few of the artists who I love. And at the moment, because of lockdown, our galleries are closed. So when I am working and looking to be inspired by other art, then it's my books, it's my iPad, and so on. So that concludes the third video in the series. Now with the next one, it is touching on the more practical side of how to go about the picture. But I hope that this has been helpful, and thanks for watching. Catch up with you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.